to it.
29.
Morning, Dr. James.
Good morning.
You said that one of the things that you do is to review the death examiner's report before you conduct an autopsy.
That's correct. When it's available.
And was it available at the time that you conducted this autopsy?
I don't recall.
You said to the jury that Maureen Argie's body was lying face down on the bed.
Yes, by the scene photographs.
You did ultimately review the death examiner's report.
Yes.
Page 26. If you could review the second paragraph of the report.
Yes.
Doesn't the death examiner report indicate that her body was lying right lateral on the right side of the bed?
It does, with her face down into the mattress.
You also said that you changed your opinion about this case in part due to the absence of a phenomenon called Toxicologist. Is that correct?
Tardot spots.
And what is that?
Tardot spots are punctate hemorrhages that occur as part of the decomposition process postmortemly.
And you're saying that you just now realize that that did not exist?
No, ma'am. So I did not document any Tardot spots at autopsy, but it's 2 years later. I have more experience. I feel more comfortable now calling this an outright homicide than I did then.
And I deposed you this summer, correct?
Yes,
You didn't tell me that you changed your opinion at that time, did you?
I did not.
So you've had about 2 months to reconsider your opinion after the deposition?
Yes, ma'am.
And when did you first notify the state that you changed your opinion?
Yesterday, I just made a flippant remark that I would call it outright.
So you said you got you majored in biology in college, correct?
Correct.
You got a master's in biological sciences,
Yes.
and then you went on to a degree in osteopathic medicine.
Yes, it's a medical degree.
And that medical degree is not an MD, correct?
It's equivalent.
And what degree do you have?
Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine.
And osteopathic means holistic medicine, is that accurate?
No, it is not.
It is different from a medical degree.
It is not. It is a medical degree.
It is a different type of school than a degree in medicine,
So
MD.
it is a different degree, yes, ma'am, but it is an equivalent degree.
And you're saying that it's not holistic, it's not that?
Correct. It is not in a holistic medicine. It's an,
So explain the difference to the jury,
sure. Thank you for the opportunity.
anytime.
So an MD is a person that went to an allopathic medical school. So that's what you typically think of with physicians. My degree is a Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine, which is a DO degree, is the abbreviation at the end of my name. So what that means is I took the same courses as an MD, but I have additional training for what is called osteopathic manipulative medicine. So that's a combination of what you might think of as physical therapy or chiropractic skills, manipulating the body to relieve musculoskeletal and other illnesses. Holistic medicine is a different field. I'm not a specialty, I'm not an expert in that because that is not what my degree is. So I have the same training as a regular MD, but I have additional training for manipulative medicine, which is that chiropractic physical therapy aspect.
So NOD has training in manipulative medicine?
DO, and
Yeah.
yes, it's called osteopathic manipulative medicine.
And manipulative medicine, like chiropractic or physical therapy, that's treating live people, people who are living, correct?
Correct.
And it looks like you decided to go into pathology.
Correct.
And the pathology that you had at the time of this experience that you had at the time of performing the autopsy of Maureen Argie included, well, you didn't do it during residency because they didn't have residency for forensic pathology, correct?
I'm sorry.
Did you do a residency?
Yes, ma'am, I did a residency. So my residency, again, is a combined program, anatomic and clinical pathology. There is no such thing as a residency in forensic pathologists. They don't exist. It is a fellowship that I completed after residency. So it is a specialty within pathology. The pathology residency program that I attended has both DOs and MDs. It's not a DO program. Again, I have the same qualifications as any MD, and they were also a part of my residency program, and then I completed the forensic pathology fellowship following that training, which is the norm.
So after your fellowship, you joined the medical examiner's offices in New Hampshire?
Correct.
And you were there for about a year when you performed this autopsy?
I believe this autopsy was in April, and I started at the end of June, so not quite a year.
And this autopsy was the first autopsy you had performed where there was an the only apparent cause of death was asphyxiation. Is that correct?
No, I had other deaths in the past that had asphyxia-related components.
It was a component, but this autopsy was solely related to asphyxiation. Is that correct? And this was your first one?
No, I've done multiple hangings, which again is a type of asphyxia. So I've done hangings, numerous, dozens.
Well, let's talk about hanging. You were shown a picture of injuries caused by ligature.
Yes.
And ligatures are the items that is used to go around the neck.
Correct.
And the pictures you were shown were items that were an inch or so.
Narrow. I wouldn't
Okay.
make a comment without measuring.
All right. And if a soft cloth was used with a wide band, that would not necessarily leave a mark. Is that correct?
Not necessarily.
So it would not leave a mark.
Correct. It would not necessarily leave a mark
And
if it was wide enough.
so you left the medical examiner's office in New Hampshire in September of 2020.
Correct.
You went to a place in Johnson County, Kansas City,
Johnson County, Kansas.
Kansas, and Johnson County is actually like the suburb of Kansas City.
Correct. It's outside of Kansas City. It does not include Kansas City.
And you are the deputy director?
Deputy medical examiner.
And how many of those are?
Only
you?
myself.
And you and the medical examiner had just opened up a new facility.
Correct.
And before that time, autopsies were farmed out to private organizations.
Johnson County did have a private firm doing autopsies until our office was created. It was voted for by the, approved by the voters.
And just to clarify your training, you don't have any practice in psychiatry?
No. Besides med school rotations, but I do not have a degree.
No practice in psychology?
Only med school courses. I do not have a degree in psychology.
No practice in general medicine?
No, just med school rotations.
So when you did the autopsy in this case, you didn't follow any guidelines?
No, the office has no written guidelines for autopsy protocols. The National Association of Medical Examiners does have standard protocols, and I do follow those.
So you follow them when you sent in the blood sample for the toxicology report? Did you send in blood samples in this case for a toxicology report?
Yes, blood samples were submitted for toxicology testing.
And that's protocol?
And that is protocol, yes, ma'am.
And why did it take until April 18th to submit those blood samples?
I can't speak to that.
You're not in charge of that?
No.
You just collect them?
I collected, it goes to our toxicology lab in house, and they send them out. So I have no bearing on when they're sent.
Before you did the autopsy in this case, you knew that Ms. Argie was in a bitter divorce?
Again, that was listed in the ADME report, and I do not recall when exactly I reviewed that. Sometimes they're turned in after the fact, because we try to do homicides as quickly as possible. So I do not recall whether I had read the report prior to autopsy.
And, but you certainly talked to the death examiner before
Yes,
the autopsy?
the ADME does contact the pathologist prior to the autopsy to give us the basic idea of the scenario. And again, the report was reviewed prior to finalization of my report.
Let's talk about the types of physical findings, not necessarily in this case. In fact, not in this case. Petechiae. We talked about the pinpoint, little blood blister type things, right?
They're not blisters, they're hemorrhages beneath the skin surface.
Little red dots on the
Yes,
skin.
ma'am.
Sometimes they can happen around the eyes.
Correct.
Sometimes they can happen around the face.
They can.
And it's caused by an interruption of the blood flow.
Correct. There's increased pressure.
And it's increased pressure on the blood flow of the vein or the artery, right?
So petechiae result when the veins have been occluded, the arteries are still pushing blood upward to the head, creating that increased pressure. So you won't have petechiae if the artery is compressed because the blood can't get there. There is no increase in pressure.
So, in other words, petechiae is not caused by direct pressure.
Petechiae are caused by increased pressure no matter the mechanism.
It's not caused by direct pressure. So if you have petechiae on the face, it's not caused by the pressure on the face.
Correct. It's an internal pressure.
Caused by something like a pressure on the neck.
Right. A pressure to the skin surface would result in a contusion. A petechia is a breakdown of the blood vessel beneath the skin surface or within a tissue.
A contusion can be caused by any pressure by an object.
Correct.
And contusions, when you look at a contusion, you can't judge the age?
Correct, until a point. If a contusion or a bruise starts to get yellow discoloration, in the literature, that happens about 5 to 7 days. But a red, a pink, a purple, a blue, there is no standard dating protocol for those, but yellow is the telltale sign that's accepted of an old bruise about 5 to 7 days old.
So a petechiae is consistent with asphyxiation. It's found in asphyxiation,
It
correct?
can be, yes,
And asphyxiation can be caused by hanging.
yes.
Contusion on the right side of the neck, that could be caused by hanging.
That would be very unlikely because of the asymmetry. And again, hanging, we usually have a furrow with an abrasion, not a contusion. A contusion is a result of an applied force, so a direct pressure or a blow to the skin surface, not a friction, unrelenting pressure that results in abrasion.
So a hanging that is caused by a sudden jolt can cause a contusion, correct?
So if a person is at a high surface and were to jump with a ligature around their throat, yes, you could have contusions, but you would also have major hemorrhage within the neck. You can have cervical spine fractures. The spine might fracture or disarticulate depending on how far the drop is. So there would be much more extensive damage in that scenario.
Okay, and a contusion is caused by a significant amount of pressure on the neck, right?
Or a direct blunt force.
And a blunt force up to 10 pounds would cause one,
Any blunt force.
okay? And a blunt force caused by a drop of one body from the bed.
I'm sorry, can you rephrase your question?
If a person has a strap around the neck
Mm-hmm.
and drops from the bed, and the ligature is around the bedpost,
Uh-huh.
and she rolls over and drops, that weight of the body caused a contusion on the side of the neck.
So in that scenario, again, the ligature envelops the neck, one side to the other or all the way around. You would expect trauma to both sides, not just one side. You would not expect that asymmetric trauma. Again, that could cause a bruise, but it would be highly unlikely that it would be focal and only in one location. I'd expect symmetrical trauma from something being around the neck.
And you said that you observed abrasion on a lower jaw on this case?
Yes,
That's consistent, that can be consistent with a suicide
by
injury by a piece of cloth?
so abrasions can be caused by any trauma. It's non-specific in itself. You know, kids fall down on the playground and get abrasions to their knees. That's what we're most familiar with. It's any cause of friction. So it could be accident, it could be homicide, it could be suicide. Any of those things could cause an abrasion.
You mentioned you found bruising consistent with the biting of the tongue.
Yes,
And that's also consistent, can be found in an injury caused by suicide.
yes,
Same things with the muscles in the neck. If there's enough compression caused by a strap around the neck, that could cause the injury.
Again, with a ligature around the neck, we would expect to see symmetric injury to both sides as the ligature envelops the neck. It would not be more prominent on one side or the other. It would be symmetrical. So yes, you can have hemorrhage in the neck with a hanging, but it would be involving both sides of the neck if present.
You're assuming that the hanging happens and starts symmetrically, correct?
Yes, gravity is a downward fall, so that would be one direction.
So you completed your report on May 14th.
Yes, the report was finalized on May 14th, 2019.
Before you completed a report, you talked to the lead investigator in this case.
Yes,
And because you were probably giving him the information from the toxicology report that's finished on March 29th.
I don't know if I gave him the results.
But he gave you information.
Yes,
And he gave you information about the investigation.
correct.
And then you completed the autopsy. With that information, you completed the autopsy report. Is that correct?
Yes, the autopsy report was completed on May 14th, 2019.
And after talking to the lead investigator, you concluded in my opinion, that Maureen Argie, a 41-year-old white female, died as a result of a probable homicide asphyxiation, which may include manual strangulation and/or smothering. Did I read that? Is that correct?
Correct, that's how it's written.
And I asked you questions back on July, I believe it's 26, very similar to the ones I'm asking today, right?
Yes,
And it was yesterday that you decided that you had enough experience to determine that it's no longer probable. Is that right? I'm sorry, I just asked a yes or no question. Is that right?
yes. If
Okay,
I was
thank you.
signing out the report today, I would not put probable.
No further questions.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Okay, and may this witness be excused by both sides?
Yes, Your Honor.
Attorney Nye?
Yes.
Doctor, you can step down, you can stay or leave as you choose. Thank you.
Judge, at this time, the state rests.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we take a brief recess? I want to chat with counsel. So, ladies and gentlemen, you'll go back down to the jury deliberation room as soon as I'm able to have you return. You will. Thank you.
All right.
Attorney Nye.
Yes.
Anything you want to address the court about?
In terms of a motion to dismiss,
Well, whatever, I just
As you
figured
want
I'd
to address the court.
do it outside of the jury's presence, that's all. Okay.
with respect to the charges of, all three charges, I think, in light of most favorable to the state, no reasonable jury can find that Mr. Argie had the requisite mental state to either commit the crime of first-degree murder or second-degree murder, and that he had previously disposed of phones, and I think they would not be heard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms.
Judge,
Tate?
to stabilize on the evidence you saw and heard over the past few days, as well as the reasonable inferences that you can derive therefrom.
And as council knows, the burden at this point is taking the evidence in the light most favorable to the state. The court finds that the state has sufficiently put forth evidence upon which a reasonable jury could conclude by proof beyond reasonable doubt that Mr. Argie committed each element of the 3 charges that are before them for consideration. And so for that reason, the motion is denied. Of course, yes. Anything further?
No, we anticipated it would be calling Mr. Argie.
Okay, great. I'm happy to have that start now. If I'm not sure how long his testimony will be, but if we break for lunch, we break for lunch, and
That's
then we'll.
fine. The state did bring up an issue that might affect the course of the testimony.
Sure.
Yesterday, I think they tried to assert marital privilege, and I'll let Attorney Berman Dunn address the court on that issue.
So, a couple of responses. One is that there is certainly case law to conclude that the marital privilege would not survive the death of a spouse. I think the case law that indicates as such is our First Circuit case, in Ray's Nguyen, it's 502 F2D 110. Moreover, though, no privilege is absolute, and can certainly be outweighed by countervailing interests. In this particular instance, Mr. Argie's testimony about conversation that he and his deceased wife had, which would include statements made by Mr. Argie, not statements made by Maureen herself, that testimony would be in service of presenting a defense to the charges here. Mr. Argie's right to all proofs favorable would, we believe, outweigh the marital privilege here, if the court does believe that indeed survives death of one spouse.
Okay. Attorney Hinckley, anything further?
Judge, first, we did not assert any privilege. For example, if a witness had a Fifth Amendment privilege, we would bring that to the court's attention. That would be our duty as court officers. I do need to clarify something. I was under the impression that Mr. Goddet was the executor of the estate. That is not the case. So I don't know. I do know that it survives the death of the deceased. I don't know who holds the privilege at this point in time.
Okay.
With respect to the defense saying that if no privilege is absolute and it defers to all proofs favorable, that deals with admissible evidence. So, for example, if we had a hearsay objection, which we don't because the defense would say it goes to somebody's state of mind, but were we to have a hearsay objection and that was a proper objection, then the evidence would not be able to be admitted, regardless of Mr. Argie's constitutional rights. Whether it's a privilege or a hearsay, if it's inadmissible evidence, it's inadmissible evidence. And with respect to the marital privilege, that refers to testimonial evidence, which Mr. Argie is anticipating giving, regarding communications, regardless of who the speaker is. It's regardless of whether or not it's what Mr. Argie said or what his wife said. They're privileged communications as centrally relevant to the marriage status.
Obviously, I'm somewhat ruling on this in a vacuum because, well, we had, I'll call it an offer of proof by way of an opening. I don't know specifically what Mr. Argie is going to testify to or not. I can say that during the course of this trial, I heard testimony with regard to conversations that occurred between Mr. Argie and Maureen Argie as to their marital status and the breakdown of that marriage. And each of them discussed that situation with people outside of their marriage. And at least insofar as case law I've reviewed in this context and in other cases, when those involved in that type of marital communication speak about that same topic with others, they waive their marital privilege. And this case has been flooded with comments made by Maureen Argie as well, Bill Argie, to others about their marital status. We've seen emails and text messaging from Maureen Argie about that marital status and about, if you will, conversations with Mr. Argie. They might have been general comments, but they were comments nonetheless. And so based upon that finding at this point, the court concludes that the issue of their marital status was waived as it relates to Mr. Argie testifying about it during his examination. Again, I'm reaching this conclusion in a little bit of a vacuum. I don't know specifically what he'll say or not say. And so in a general sense, I'm going to allow the testimony, but it's certainly depending upon what the topic is or the exact answer is. If the state thinks that they maintain an objection, then certainly they should offer it up to the court, and I'll hear from both sides and issue a further ruling as needed. I agree as well that in terms of who holds that privilege at this point, it's not the state, and at this point I don't have anybody else objecting. So, but notwithstanding that, at this point I find that the topic of that marriage and the breakdown of that marriage as it relates to a waiver exists. So anything further I can address before we resume?
Yes, I assume that Mr. Argie will be swapping and using the clear mask for his testimony.
He will. Okay, anything else? Okay, I'm happy to have the jury come back in unless you need a brief recess.
Look, I don't know where their masks are, so we
But
can
we'll-
put that on.
Yep, yes, we can have that happen right now. Yes, it is, yes. Yep. Okay. So we'll bring the jury in, and then Mr. Argie will come up and take the stand. Thank you. Why don't you take that down? Give that back to the state, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Sorry about that.
Not a problem.
All rise for the jury, please.